To the weather, the deep freeze that has gripped the north slid across the south today. Daytime temperatures are more than 30 degrees below normal, down into the teens and 20s across Mississippi, Alabama, Florida, Georgia, and the Carolinas. More than 2,000 flights are already canceled for tomorrow. Here's Manuel Bajorquez.
This was I-95 through Brunswick, Georgia, and while it isn't rare to see a massive backup here, the cause of this one was ice on the road this far south. Dozens of long-haul drivers decided it was time to pull over. Even Lee Church, who is from Indiana, put it in park.
Trying to get up to at least somewhere in South Carolina because I knew it was supposed to start snowing. Didn't work out that way.
Why not?
Well, I'd say there's about a quarter inch of ice on the road, and it's icing everything up, and just snow on top of it. It's just a real bad situation.
Hundreds of accidents littered roadways from Georgia to the Carolinas. Semi-trucks flipped over and cars lost control. Those who didn't heed the warnings to stay off roads found themselves stuck. Georgia State Patrol Captain Chris Wright.
This is not something that our people are accustomed to dealing with. So we want them to stay home, stay off the roadway, and stay safe and stay warm.
The southern snow dipped as far as Tallahassee, Florida, which hadn't seen much of any snowfall in nearly 3 decades. And while it wasn't a whiteout, it was an unusual sight for tourists in the Palmetto State. Gus Kroll is visiting Charleston.
It's pretty wild. I've never seen palm trees with snow on them before.
Heading into tonight, winds could cause more power outages along southern coastal communities. Ice that's formed on trees and power lines threatens to weigh down and snap them.
Here's a rare sight in Tallahassee, Florida. Yes, that is snow that is coming down. In fact, the National Weather Service reporting 1/10 of an inch of snowfall in downtown Tallahassee. Now, that's the first measurable snow since 1989.
Here we go. It's time for the big storm. This is going to be a real deal blizzard in the Northeast, especially along the coast. You can see people out at the grocery stores getting ready. The time window is closing very quickly. The storm's moving pretty fast, and Thursday is going to be a wash.
As people across the U.S. battle dangerously cold conditions, Americans on the East Coast are bracing for a ferocious winter storm. The National Weather Service says the storm is expected to hammer the southeast to New England with snow, ice, rain, and strong winds. Some meteorologists think these extreme conditions could help develop a bomb cyclone. The National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration says, like other storms, these usually happen when a weather pattern has a huge pressure change in a short time. And those pressure changes can create violent winds and weather. As the Washington Post notes, the storm could resemble a winter hurricane with damaging gusts and blizzard conditions. Forecasters warn the storm could last into Friday and that travel could be hazardous. Tropical depression Agaton has killed at least 2 and displaced thousands since making landfall Tuesday in the central Philippines. Both deaths occurred in Malabuyok in southern Cebu province. A 64-year-old woman died when a landslide hit her home, and a 39-year-old man died after jumping through a window in panic. Agaton's heavy winds and rains caused landslides and floods in many Philippine provinces. The National Disaster Risk Reduction and Management Council said over 4,000 families have been evacuated. Agaton comes after 2 major tropical storms hit the country in December. Tropical storm Urduha, known internationally as Kaitak, hit the Visayas, and tropical storm Vinta, also known as Tembin, struck Mindanao. Together, the December storms killed nearly 300. About 20 major storms hit the Philippines each year.
Storm Eleanor has battered Ireland with furious waves washing up coastal roads, causing flooding and cutting power to tens of thousands of homes. Here in the harbor city of Galway, some people had to be rescued from the rising waters in kayaks. Transport links have been affected, and local police have warned drivers of debris on many roads. The storm is also wreaking havoc in the UK, where the Met Office has issued a yellow warning for very strong winds across most of the country. Gusts of up to 160 kilometers per hour have been recorded since Tuesday night. Traffic is being disrupted by fallen power lines and trees, sometimes very big ones like here in Belfast. The storm is now moving further south and has already cut power to 200,000 households in northern France.
In Switzerland, 8 people were injured when strong winds blew a train off its rails on Wednesday. The accident happened near Lenk on the Montreux-Oberland-Bernois regional service at around midday. A police spokesman said 7 people with slight injuries were taken to hospital in ambulances, while the 8th was flown by helicopter. Strong gales affected most of the country during the storm, with gusts reaching almost 200 kilometres an hour near Lucerne, the highest there since records began in 1981.
And this morning there were so many going down. It was so many pictures. They're all tilted.
Pictures that were not that way when Tina and Dwayne Moore got into bed last night. But shortly after 12:30 this morning, their battleground home and everything in it shook.
It was a second, if two, just a bang, 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 and everything shook.
The motion we felt was kind of north-south. You could actually kind of feel the direction that the motion was moving.
That motion was the result of a magnitude 3.9 earthquake that hit east of Spirit Lake, about 7 miles from Mount St. Helens. People from Portland all the way to Seattle reported feeling it. Dwayne and Tina say it wasn't anything scary, but it was different.
It's been a long while since we felt anything here, yeah.
The Moores say the last time they felt an earthquake that strong in this area was back in the early 80s, shortly after Mount St. Helens erupted.
There's another small aftershock there.
Seismologist Wes Thielen says that's about right. He says while earthquakes do happen relatively often in this area, this recent one certainly piqued his curiosity.
This was sort of notable because this is actually a fairly large earthquake. So magnitude 3.9 is the largest earthquake that we've seen in this particular area. But even right around St. Helens, this is the second largest earthquake that we've seen since 1981.
Still, he says there is no reason to be concerned. This was just normal movement between tectonic plates in the area and is not directly related to the volcano or any potential subduction zone earthquake. But he says it is a good reminder that earthquakes can and do happen here in the Pacific Northwest.
It's just part of living in this part of the country.
FEMA has ruled out a new policy that will no longer allow the agency to discriminate against houses of worship. FEMA says it will allow religious establishments to receive equal access to federal disaster relief funding. The new policy comes in response to 2 lawsuits from 3 Texas churches and 2 Florida synagogues seeking disaster aid.
French President Emmanuel Macron has criticized Israel, the United States and Saudi Arabia for encouraging the Iranian anti-regime protests, saying the 3 countries could lead us to war. Macron has called for talks with the Islamic Republic following US President Donald Trump's support of the protesters through a series of tweets, which has enraged Tehran, and Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's praise for what he called heroic demonstrators protesting against the cruel regime in a YouTube video posted Monday.
Iran's Revolutionary Guard claims the days of anti-government protests are over. But as correspondent Rich Edson reports, the Trump administration is not finished calling for worldwide support for the uprisings.
State television in Iran. Thousands demonstrating in support of the regime. Analysts say many are government workers. Iran's government insists it has defeated what it calls the sedition and that anti-government protests are under control. One analyst says that's wrong.
There are reports that the insurgents have attacked government offices, burned down posters of Ayatollah Khamenei, the supreme leader, besieged Revolutionary Guards bases. So there's a lot going on.
And the Trump administration from the top is firmly siding with the protesters. President Trump tweeted this morning, quote, "Such respect for the people of Iran as they try to take back their corrupt government. You will see great support from the United States at the appropriate time."
You now have a president who has spoken unequivocally on behalf of those people, said he stands with them.
State Department is also pushing for social media access in Iran, posting in Farsi on its Facebook page and Twitter feed messages of support. Analysts say these widespread protests appear to have surprised the regime, and they expect the instability to continue.
The Iranian regime will not easily change. I don't think it could easily be overthrown. It is still quite strong. They haven't cracked down as harshly as they could have because they're worried about the consequences.
In Israel, security services say they have foiled an attempt by the Iranian intelligence to set up a cell in the West Bank. 3 people have been arrested in connection with the cell that was allegedly operated by an Iranian agent operating from South Africa. The aim of the cell was reportedly promoting terror missions against Israel, including recruiting suicide bombers and Arab-Israeli citizens within Israel. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu commented on this development a short time ago.
I would like to bring to your attention that Iran is operating in a terrorist fashion against the state of Israel, not only by assisting terror movements like Hamas, Hezbollah, and the Islamic Jihad, but also by trying to organize terror attacks inside Israeli territory and against Israeli citizens.
All right. For the average Israeli citizen, the idea of just buying a plane ticket and flying into Syria, well, that pretty much sounds like a death wish. But that's exactly what Israeli journalist Jonathan Spyer has just done. And that's not all. He even met twice with a top Syrian minister while he was there, all under the guise of traveling with a British passport.
Given the fact that Syria sees Israel as one of its biggest enemies, a trip like that should have been a suicide mission. But Spyer has lived to tell the tale of how he was able to get into Syria and remain in the country unharmed, which according to him is all thanks to the gross incompetence of Syrian authorities. Spyer was actually able to interview Syrian ministers and access high-security areas by joining a propaganda trip. Ironically, Spyer says that while fear of Israeli infiltration is a constant topic in Syria, everyone talked about it too much to realize that an infiltrator was sitting right next to them. Spyer actually met not once but twice with the minister responsible for securing Syria's borders. Syrian President Bashar Assad has learned of those meetings and immediately fired the minister from his cabinet. Spyer is well aware that he's lucky to be alive, but says journalists have a duty to take certain risks. This is actually his 8th or 9th trip to Syria.
Another rocket has just been fired from Gaza into Israeli territory. The rocket has struck an empty field in southern Israel, and no injuries or damage have been reported. But the army has just launched a counterattack against Hamas military targets in the Strip. The back-and-forth exchange of rocket fire and then IDF retaliation has been consistent for several weeks now. The attacks ramped up immediately following President Trump's bombshell recognition of Jerusalem as Israel's capital, and clearly they aren't fizzling out. Netanyahu has come under fire for failing to stop the rocket launches, and some have even gone so far as to call the prime minister weak in his response. But many officials agree that pushing too hard against Hamas could spark a war that neither side wants and derail the ongoing Palestinian reconciliation efforts. Those negotiations are at a standstill currently, but Israel has a vested interest in seeing things play out without interference. Regardless, more rocket fire will only fuel tensions between Israel and Gaza and put more lives in harm's way.
The Israeli parliament's taken a first step towards amending the criminal code and making the death sentence more possible for certain offences. Israeli military courts, which handle cases involving Palestinians in the occupied West Bank, already have the power to issue the death sentence, although this has never been implemented. I think that in extreme situations there's also a simple logic. And the simple logic is if someone slaughters and laughs, they will not spend the rest of their life in jail but will be executed. So this, in my view, requires this result. Asked by an Israeli Arab lawmaker whether he would also apply this reasoning to Jewish militants convicted of killing Palestinians, Netanyahu said in principle yes. Israel has only ever executed one person in the nation's history, ex-Nazi Adolf Eichmann, in 1962. Currently, all 3 judges on a military tribunal have to agree on any death sentence. The new law will require a simple majority. The United States is very generous with its aid, and the dollar has always been integral to foreign policy. But President Trump's weaponizing of donations to punish the United Nations, and now the Palestinians, and possibly Pakistanis, shows how easily the purse strings can be cut if recipients don't play ball. In the West Bank and Gaza, Palestinians said a cut in aid would be met with a response. Palestinians will react in the same way. If he cuts the funds, we should withdraw from the Oslo Agreement, freeze security coordination with Israel, and even dismantle the Palestinian Authority if needed, and go back to the starting point. That's the suitable reaction to Trump's decisions. Among the top 16 of US aid recipients, dominated by Israel and Egypt, Gaza and the West Bank are 15th and 16th, while Pakistan is in 11th place. Of the 27 biggest recipients, only 3 others, Colombia, Ukraine and Bangladesh, are outside Africa or the Middle East. Pakistan's by far the US's biggest bet in Asia after Afghanistan. All could feel the chill from the White House at any time.
I would say that Palestinian rights are not for sale, and we will not succumb to blackmail. There are imperatives and requirements for peace, and unilaterally President Trump has destroyed them. He has even sabotaged our efforts at achieving a just peace and getting freedom and dignity for the Palestinian people. By recognizing occupied Jerusalem as the capital of Israel, he has not only disqualified himself as a peace broker or a mediator by taking sides and by becoming complicit in Israel's occupation, he has also totally sabotaged, he has totally destroyed the very foundations of peace.
Now, Yemen has suffered its first deadly airstrike of 2018, with more than 20 killed in the key port city of Hodeidah on New Year's Day. 3 of the world's biggest humanitarian agencies have now joined together to highlight that Yemen has passed the grim milestone of enduring more than 1,000 days of war, explaining that 3/4 of the Yemeni population needs humanitarian aid, and also that about 2/3 are deprived of food, water and proper sanitation.
Norway halted weapons and ammunition exports to the United Arab Emirates. The country's foreign ministry announced a suspension of arms sales to the UAE January 3rd, saying Norway fears the weapons could fuel the war in Yemen. Reuters reports the decision was made mid-December, but only now made public. Norwegian officials said there is no evidence that arms exported from their country have been used in war-torn Yemen. However, the UAE is part of a Saudi-led coalition that's been fighting Houthi rebel groups that control parts of Yemen, including the capital Sana'a. The war, which has lasted for the better part of 3 years, has killed more than 10,000 people and displaced more than 3 million. Food shortages and disease outbreaks affect millions more. Norway fears there is a risk its arms exports could be involved. Data released by Statistics Norway show Norwegian arms exports to the UAE nearly doubled from 2015 to 2016.
The U.S. military said that it carried out an airstrike in Somalia Tuesday, killing 2 al-Shabaab militants and destroying a vehicle carrying explosives. U.S. Africa Command said that the strike occurred in the early morning hours on January 2nd, roughly 30 miles west of Mogadishu. AFRICOM said that in addition to killing 2 al-Shabaab extremists, the strike destroyed a vehicle carrying explosives, quote, preventing it from being used against the people in Mogadishu. The strike came after the U.S. urged its non-essential diplomatic personnel to evacuate the capital city, warning of a potential imminent threat. The U.S. military carried out more than 30 drone strikes last year against al-Shabaab and fighters linked to the Islamic State in Somalia. Tuesday's strike marked the first drone strike this year in the country.
A key communication line between North and South Korea is up and running for the first time in nearly 2 years. South Korea's Ministry of Unification confirmed North Korean leader Kim Jong-un gave the order for the line to be reopened Wednesday. According to several reports, the 2 countries later made contact over the hotline for 20 minutes to make sure it was operating correctly. The move came 2 days after Kim Jong-un extended what seemed to be an olive branch to South Korea during his annual New Year's Day speech. South Korea responded by proposing high-level talks between the 2 countries on January 9th. As of Wednesday morning, no word yet on if that meeting will happen.
Does this administration believe that the deep state is a real thing, that there is this shadow government out there actively plotting to sabotage him?
President Donald Trump tweeted Tuesday suggesting the U.S. Department of Justice is part of the so-called deep state. Here's what that is. The deep state is a conspiracy theory purporting a behind-the-scenes network of officials in the U.S. government and elsewhere are working to influence policy and delegitimize elected leadership. In this case, the Trump administration. Trump has referenced the deep state on other occasions, and former White House chief strategist Steve Bannon and Fox News' Sean Hannity have promoted the conspiracy. Trump's son, Eric Trump, also tweeted Tuesday suggesting Hillary Clinton, Barack Obama, and Ellen DeGeneres are all part of the so-called deep state.
Donald Trump is a known fan of McDonald's.
At a town hall in 2016, Mr. Trump said to the crowd about the fast food chain, "I like cleanliness, and I think you're better off going there than maybe someplace that you have no idea where the food is coming from." President Trump's love for fast food and the chain is also tied to his fear about being poisoned, according to an excerpt from Michael Wolff's Fire and Fury, which was published in New York Magazine on Wednesday. Wolff writes that Trump has a longtime fear of being poisoned. Also, that he likes to eat McDonald's because nobody knew he was coming and the food was safely pre-made.